Okay, and back just in time. I would like to give the word to Louise Robertson from the UK, who prepared together with Pat and Lisbeth a great presentation. I would say let's take it away, Louise.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for asking me to talk today. So it's going to be a bit more of a practical, interactive session. So my name is Louise Robertson. I am the dietitian for the Galactosemia support group in the UK, and I'm a metabolic dietitian at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham in the UK. I've been doing that post about 12 years now, and also looking after people with galactosemia, adults with galactosemia. And I've been doing the dietitian role for the GSG for the last 18 months when I took over from Pat, who had been the dietitian for the society for 20 years previous to that. So Pat has a wealth of knowledge. So I'm doing the presentation, but I know Pat is in the background and has supported me writing this talk. And Pat, if there's anything you want to say as I'm going through, please just speak up in case I've missed anything.
Will do.
Thank you, Pat. Okay, so this is what we've all been talking about today, the international guidelines. And you can see that Pat helped write, was part of writing the guidelines, along with lots of other people and lots of experts that we've already heard speak today. So the first poll, we've got quite a lot of polls coming up, is since the guidelines came out in 2017, have you made any changes to your diet? Now, if you're not, if you're a health professional, then you could answer this. Would you have told your patients to make any changes since the guidelines came out? So hopefully it won't take too long to vote.
I'll wait till we have 50% of the votes. I need one more, two more. I need one more vote.
Okay, so 66% say yes, they have made some changes. So that's great. Okay, so as we've already heard today, the first recommendation that is to do with diet was recommendation number 4, where clinicians should immediately commence a galactose restricted diet with either a soy-based, a casein hydrolysate or an elemental formula if classical galactosemia is suspected in an infant without waiting for confirmation of the diagnosis. So hopefully that's not much of a major change, and different countries will have different availability of suitable infant feeds. So in the UK, we would use a soya-based feed, but I know that's not available everywhere in Europe. Oh, going the wrong way, I'm sorry. Hang on. Oh, definitely going the wrong way now. I think it's because of the lag. It's a bit confusing.
You'll get the hang of it. It's a bit slow.
Apologies. Okay, so the second poll, which should come up in a moment. Oh, or not. You might have to do it for me. Right.
Barely.
So I've got 2 polls here. The first one is going to relate to infants and children, and then the second poll is going to relate to adults. And I just want to get a feel of how you manage your diet, how you manage your child's diet, or if you're a health professional, what you would recommend for the diet. So this is just for infants and children. Do you manage the diet by avoiding milk, avoiding some vegetables and legumes, or 2, by avoiding milk products only, strictly checking the labels and strictly checking foods in restaurants? Or do you avoid milk products, but you don't really strictly check all labels or foods in restaurants? Do you avoid milk, but occasionally might, not so strict, and occasionally might have a baked product in that has milk in it, for example, bread? Do you not restrict anything? Or maybe that question isn't applicable because you either advise adults or you're an adult yourself. Sorry, there's quite a lot of options.
Okay, we're at over 50 answers, so I'll end the polling now.
Yeah. Great. So the highest with 62% is avoiding milk products and strictly checking the labels on food restaurants, and that's in children and infants. Okay, so we'll do the next poll, and it is the same, but it's if you're an adult or you're advising adults. There we go. So the same answers again. If you're an adult or advising an adult, you say to avoid milk, vegetables and legumes, just to avoid milk products, but strictly checking labels, avoiding milk products, but not strictly checking labels, avoiding milk products, but occasionally might have a small amount, well, have a product such as a baked product with a small amount of milk in. You don't restrict anything, or it's not applicable to you because maybe you have a child or an infant.
I think this was the other half.
Thank you. So it's good to see that people aren't avoiding vegetables and legumes. It's a bit less, a bit more evened out this time, isn't it? Some people are not so strict for adults, but no one's saying not to restrict anything. So that's good. Okay. Great, it's moved on. Okay, so recommendation number 5, and we've been over these a lot already. So we recommend treating patients with classical galactosemia with a lifelong galactose-restricted diet that only eliminates sources of lactose and galactose from dairy products. So only from milk, but permits galactose from non-milk sources that contribute minimal dietary galactose. So things like fruit, vegetables, and legumes. And then later on, we say, at present, there's insufficient evidence to support a specific age-related recommendation for the quantity of galactose allowed in the diet. So we've not got enough evidence to say that maybe in adulthood, you can have a bit more galactose in your diet. It might be that some people, after looking at those questions, adults are naturally having a little bit more, but we haven't actually got the evidence at the moment. We may do in the future with some of the studies that have been going on. I don't know why it takes 5 seconds to go to the next one. must be far away from you. So, as we've already heard today, that the paper from the GalNet registry, the first report that came out last year, is also supporting just a restriction of milk. So if you don't know, the GalNet registry collects information from people with galactosemia in Europe, and information collected includes when they were diagnosed, any complications, and what type of diet they're on. And one of the conclusions they found was that people with galactosemia who follow a diet that just restricts lactose from milk sources had better neurological outcomes than those who followed a diet where they restricted galactose from milk and fruit and vegetables. So this paper supports the guidelines. So that's great. And I've got another poll coming up. Right, so poll number 4. So we're going to think about where we find the most galactose in our foods. So the poll is, which food has the highest galactose content? Is it 100 mils of cow's milk, 100 grams of cow's butter, 100 grams of butter oil or milk fat, or 100 gram serving of vegetables? I feel like I should do a countdown. Da, da, da. Get your answers in.
Okay, I'll stop the polling now. I think the answer is clear.
Brilliant. And of course, you're all right. It is 100 mils of cow's milk. 88% of people said that. So 100 mils of cow's milk contains 2,400 milligrams of galactose. 100 grams of butter, cow's butter, is much less than cow's milk. It's only 685 milligrams of galactose. So it must be to do with the processing. Now, number 3, 100 grams of butter, oil or milk fat. Now, this is very low in galactose. So butter, oil or milk fat is used in the food industry because it's more stable than butter. So you don't find it on its own, but you find it within manufactured goods. It's made by removing all the protein and lactose, and so we're just left with the fat with minimal amounts of lactose and galactose in it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, where to find it. And then your fruit and vegetables, as you can see, the 100 gram serving only has around 9 milligrams of galactose in it. And as was mentioned already, Prof. Berry's work in the 90s found that a diet enriched in fruits and vegetables was found to only contain about 54 milligrams of galactose per day. And as we've already discussed, our bodies make their own supply of galactose, and the figure, how much our bodies make, is much higher than this figure of 54 milligrams a day. So that's why we allow vegetables and fruit in the diet. There's no evidence that they cause any harm. So we definitely do not allow milk and milk products because they're high in lactose. And lactose is a disaccharide, which means it is 2 sugars joined together. One is glucose and one is galactose. So that's lactose from cows or any mammalian milk, and goat's milk as well. Now, how do we work out if our foods contain milk, or manufactured foods? Well, lucky for us in Europe, the EU allergen rules or laws state that there are 14 allergens, and if any of the allergens are in these foods, they have to be declared on the label. And lucky for us, one of the allergens is milk. So if milk is in a product, it will always be declared on the label because of the EU rulings. Now, galactosemia is not an allergy, but it is lucky that milk is an allergen, so it will appear on the labels. So when you're looking at a label, here's an example. So when you're checking, all you need to look for is milk. So you can see the one at the top doesn't contain milk. And then the one at the bottom, you can see there's a few sources of milk in there and they're highlighted in bold, so we can easily see. I was talking about butter oil or milk fat earlier. So butter oil, I know in the UK, it's also known as butter fat, and milk fat is also known as anhydrous milk fat, and they're basically the same. So if the product, if you're looking at the label, if the only source of milk is from butter oil, then that would be okay to have, because it would have minimal lactose or galactose in it. So this chocolate covered biscuit is a dark chocolate one, but you have to be careful and always look at labels, because you can see the same chocolate coated biscuit in the milk chocolate version contains the butter oil, but it also contains milk from other sources such as the milk chocolate and the dried skimmed milk. So this version would not be allowed because it contains milk. So the next poll is, are lactose-free products okay to have in the diet for galactosemia? So the answer is just yes or no. So it's just not, you get lactose-free milks, but you also get lactose-free cheeses and creams and spreads.
The interesting thing is I can already see the answers, but you cannot, Louise. Well, I'll end the polling now.
No, that is correct. So you all obviously know that lactose-free products, these are products that are aimed at people who are lactose intolerant. So they are milk products and they have an enzyme added to them that breaks down the lactose. So for people with lactose intolerance, that means they can have these products because there's lactose has gone right down. But as we said before, lactose is made of glucose and galactose. So when you break down the lactose, you still have a lot of galactose in the product. So therefore, they're not suitable for people with galactosemia. So there's some pictures here of when I went around the supermarket and just picked loads of them off the shelf. So many different varieties these days. So some of them, well, in the UK, some of them have a warning on to say not suitable for galactosemia, but some of the bigger brands don't. So just to be wary of that. So the next poll, hopefully it will come up. My slide will come up. So poll 6, do you allow foods that say on the label may contain a source of milk or made in the same factory as the milk? And the answer is no or yes. And actually, if you were listening earlier to the presentations, you'll know the answer to this. Okay. Yes, so 91% have said yes, they do allow foods that say this. And this is all to do with cross-contamination. So these products will have very little or no lactose in these products. So they will be suitable in the diet. So they're just products that maybe have been made in the same factory where another product with milk has been made. And these are really for people with allergy, they're allergy advisors. And as we said before, galactosemia isn't an allergy, so it's absolutely fine to have in galactosemia. So recommendation number 6 is talking again about the diet strictness. So we allow any types of fruit and vegetables in the diet. This is, as we've heard lots before today is because there's only a very small amount of galactose in them and there's no evidence of harm from them. I do apologise for it being very slow.
Louise, if I may interrupt, there is a question here to compare.
Yes.
We have the amount of galactose, for example, for legumes or nuts. Can you say something about that?
Yes. So we do allow legumes and nuts within the diet. And I think, do tell me if I've got this wrong, but Prof. Berry's, when he looked at the fruits and vegetables, was also looking at legumes as well within the diet. I don't know, Pat, if you have anything to add about legumes.
I think when we were looking at the guidelines, there was a lot of discussion about them, but by then I think we had accepted that the amount in terms of portion sizes was not usually a problem. So although we recognise that there is a little bit more galactose in legumes than say in a green vegetable, but still it helps provide variety and is not significantly going to affect the galactose content.
Great, thank you, Pat, thank you. So also allowing legumes and unfermented soy-based products, which is things like soya and tofu, but also fermented soy-based products can be allowed in the diet in small quantities. So unfermented soy-based products are things like soy sauce and miso soup, miso paste. And we do know that they're higher in galactose, but the amount you would use in the diet is fairly small. The amount of soy sauce, you wouldn't be, you only use a little bit at a time. And then the bit in the middle is about, we allow mature cheeses with a galactose content of less than 25 milligrams per 100 grams. Now I'll come on to that in the next few slides. And also that we allow food additives, sodium or calcium caseinate. Now, these are food additives and they provide solubility and viscosity. They're used in emulsifying and foaming, and they improve shelf life. So Pat told me there was some debate over this during the guidelines, and the USA traditionally allowed caseinates in the diet, and in the UK we didn't. But sodium caseinate actually only contains less than 0.2% of lactose, so a very small amount of lactose. And we wouldn't consume much of them anyway. And with the liberalisation of the guidelines to less than 25 milligrams of galactose per 100 grams, then we felt that actually it was hard to justify their exclusion. So it's just because such small amounts are used in the diet and they have a minimal amount in that they have been allowed in the diet. So the next poll, when my screen moves forward, is about cheese. So poll 7, do you allow any cheese in the diet? Either no, yes, I allow cheese, all cheeses, yes, only certain types of cheese, or you'd have vegan cheese. Okay, so that's great. 85% of people saying yes, they'll allow a certain type of cheese in the diet. So maybe very familiar with the guidelines already. Great. So We allow mature.
Louise, just before you start, I see already the question and answers. This is raising already lots of questions, especially about mature cheese and vegan, and vegan is no cheese. I would agree with that. So especially about the mature, and I know this is a tough question already for many years, so do your best.
Okay, maybe, hopefully I'll answer some questions with this. So we allow mature cheese with a galactose content of less than 25 milligrams per 100 grams. But how do we know which cheeses have that in them? Well, in the UK, we have analysed lots of different cheeses, and we know in the UK that mature cheeses such as Gruyere, Italian Parmesan, Emmental, Jarlsberg, and in the UK, we love cheddar cheese, and we have tested cheddar cheese and know that extra mature and vintage mature cheddar cheese is low enough, falls under the 25 milligrams. So we allow those cheeses in the diet. And then cheeses with a galactose content of more than 25 milligrams per 100 gram tend to be softer cheeses, cheeses that have not been matured for a long time, or like manufactured cheeses such as cheese slices or cheese found in manufactured goods. And of course, every country will have a different selection of cheese, and they'll have different cheese making processes. So I would always check with your dietitian of your local country which cheeses you allow in the diet specifically. So how is lactose lost in cheese? Why do we allow cheese in the diet? Well, the bacteria is added in the starter culture in cheese making at the beginning, and the bacteria uses up some of the lactose. It kind of eats up the lactose. Also, as the cheese ages and it dries out, it loses whey protein and lactose as it becomes drier. So over time, it loses more lactose out of it. Now, this is a slide from work that Pat has done in the past. Again, because we like cheddar cheese in the UK, we've analysed a lot of it. And you can see that you've got along the bottom 15-month-old cheese, 14-month-old cheese, and 13-month cheese. And you can see that the 15-month-old has definitely got the lowest lactose content in there because it's the oldest. 14 months and 13 months do have slightly higher, but also to show that they're all slightly different as well. And that's because cheese is biological and it's never going to have exactly the same amount of lactose in it, depending on the starter culture and depending on how long it's been drying. But still, it's quite minimal what it's got in there. So,
may I give the word shortly to Liesbeth, because I know from we're Dutch. In Dutch, we're famous for our cheeses, and we have some differences in mature cheddar cheese and in the Dutch cheeses, and that also has a bit to do with the process, how you make cheddar compared to the Dutch cheeses, but those are similar to Emmental and Gruyere. But I will give the word to Liesbeth now.
Yes, please do.
Good evening for the European attendees. In the Netherlands, we are lucky to have a lot of hard cheeses, as we call them, that are manufactured in a way that they contain almost no lactose, even though they are young. So within a few weeks, all the lactose is, or the galactose is converted into a milk acid. So we allow also the young, hard fabric cheeses, and there are a lot. So that's what we eat here. So we're not the mature ones. Yeah.
But that's also comparable with Gruyere, for example, and Emmental. They're made with the same process.
Yeah, there's a Dutch institute on research of dairy, and they said that all the hard cheeses that are made in the Netherlands, they are okay. So I don't know exactly about the Emmental, but we do allow them, because in the other countries they allow them, but there are not many Dutch people who eat Emmental.
I see that Annette wants to say something. Go ahead, Annette.
I think you're very right, Lisbeth, but I would like to add a small warning. I think you can buy Gouda cheese, the Dutch Gouda cheese, also like in the US, in the UK, and in other countries.
Yep.
And these cheeses are not in any way like the Dutch Gouda cheese.
Yep.
It's more like milk wrapped in plastic. So I would say it doesn't go for the Gouda cheese you buy outside of the Netherlands, because I'm not sure their manufacturing process is different, but it's very different from what we eat here.
Yeah, you're really right. You see other amounts when they analyze it in the other countries. You see that those Gouda cheeses contain a lot of galactose.
Yeah, and I have a question related to this. Is that if I go to the market, how can I know if the cheese has less than 25 milligrams per 100 gram? What should we look for in the label? Can we see something on the label?
I don't think you will see anything on the label, particularly if it's in the marketplace. And that's where you're going by this guideline of a hard cheese rather than a wet cheese. And then the make of cheese. We know in the UK that our cheddar, the mature cheddar at 6 or 9 months is not suitable, because we've analysed many samples. It's the older cheese which we have to use in the UK. So we would always say UK cheese that is extra mature or vintage, rather than cheese which is just mature.
Thank you, Pat. Right, I don't know. Any more talk on cheese, or shall I move on?
Please move on.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about offal now. So the next poll is, do you allow any offal in the diet? So this could be kidney, liver pate. Is it no, yes, or in small amounts? I suppose another option could have been, I don't like it, or I do like it. So 39% no, 33% yes, and 28% in small amounts. So it's kind of like in thirds, isn't it? Sorry, maybe I've not. Right, great. So in the guidelines, in the food list, offal appears in the foods used in moderation section, along with the soy sauce and fermented products. So offal, they're galactose storage organs. They've got galactobarossides and gangliosides in them, but the opinion about whether to restrict offal in the diet was divided. Its galactose content is unknown, but there's no direct evidence of harm. It's really a theoretical risk only. Therefore, that's why we decided, well, not me, that's why it was decided to put offal in the in moderation section of the guidelines. So
I see I missed a question from Joelle Wens, and she asked still about the cheese. At what age do you authorize mature cheeses?
I think
mature cheese, is there a definition how many months it is? What is the minimum definition of mature?
Maybe Pat would like to answer that.
It's going to depend on the cheese you're talking about, whether it's a cheddar or a Gouda, and which country you're in. Within the UK, it would be for a mature cheddar, we would be saying really 9 to 12 months. So 9 months would be the youngest. But we go by the categorization, because when they put a categorization on cheese, they tend to do it by actually tasting the cheese. So a cheese may be somewhere around 9 months, or it may be 12 months before they can call it extra mature, or 12 to 15 months before they call it vintage. And it's not done on an analysis, it's done on a taste test. That's the UK information. I can't say for other countries, because they may describe the maturity of the cheese in other ways. Supermarkets tend to do it in a 1, 2, 3, 4 basis, and that again is perhaps a little bit more based on what the manufacturers say. So it's a little bit more difficult to follow, but by and large, within a supermarket cheese, you would be going for the most mature would be the number 5 in the UK. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Can I comment, just Jerome, can you hear me? Just in terms of the mature cheeses, the analysis that we did at the Food Safety Authority, just the different brands, there's quite about a 30% variation in the different brands. And I think it's really necessary for every country to look at what are the cheeses that are used, because there's about 5 or 6 different brands of mature. And so, you know, you can have the slide from the table is on the slide, and that they would correlate with, they were repeated in 2 laboratories, those analyses. So that's Leatherhead and the Food Safety Authority of Ireland laboratory. So
yes,
it's your own brand, it's your own brand in your own country, really, I think is the essential point.
And I think you're quite right too about repeating the analyses, because we have had some quite odd answers come back. If you just do one analysis, you can never be absolutely certain that's right.
Can I ask again about the age? How early can the child be before we give him cheese?
You mean how old can the child be before you start giving them cheese?
Yes, how old?
I think that would be the normal weaning guidelines that you would use in your country. So usually once they start weaning, many children will start having cheese at an early age.
And also it's good to introduce the taste of cheese early, because it's got a good calcium content as well, so they get used to it. What we find in the adults who weren't allowed cheese as children, they don't like the taste of the really strong mature cheeses. So getting children to have it earlier on and getting used to the taste is really helpful.
I think in French they have the bit orange colored mimola, which is a very good cheese.
Mimolette, yes, that's very good.
Great. Okay, shall I move on? So also we allow eggs and cacao products, so chocolate is fine to have as long as it's not milk chocolate. So the last recommendation I'm going to look at is recommendation number 7 for calcium and vitamin D. So it says, we recommend an annual dietary assessment of calcium and vitamin D intake with a measurement of plasma vitamin D levels. Both calcium and vitamin D should be supplemented as necessary, following the age-specific recommendation for the general population. So your dietitian should assess the calcium and vitamin D intake in the diet. And if you're not able to get enough from the diet, then they will probably advise you to have a supplement. And of course, calcium and vitamin D are very important for bone health and keeping your bones strong. So the next poll, just thinking about calcium and calcium in our food, which food do you think has the highest amount of calcium in it? Is it 200 mils of a fortified soya drink? When I say fortified, I mean it's got calcium added into it. Is it 200 mils of an organic soya drink? Is it 80 grams of cooked kale, 80 grams of cooked spinach, or 30 grams of Emmental cheese? So we've got 27% on the fortified soya drink and 57% are going for Emmental cheese as the highest. And I'm glad to see that number 2, no one voted for that one. So if I look at the answers, so 200 mils of a fortified soya drink has 240 milligrams of calcium in it. And they fortify the calcium with a similar amount of calcium that you would find in cow's milk. So the organic milk doesn't have any calcium. Well, in the UK, anything that's organic, you can't add things to it. So they wouldn't allow the addition of vitamins and minerals to it. Otherwise, they can't call it organic. So the point that I'm making here is that when you're buying your plant-based milks, always check that it is fortified with calcium and vitamin D, so it's a great way of getting some more calcium into your diet. Now, 80 grams of cooked kale is 120 milligrams of calcium, and 80 grams of cooked spinach is 120 milligrams of calcium, but the body can't absorb calcium very well from spinach. And this is because a lot of plant-based foods contain oxalates and phytates, which will reduce the bioavailability of calcium to the body. So spinach contains oxalates that prevent the body from absorbing the calcium efficiently, and the presence of oxalates reduces the bioavailability of calcium to only 5%. So we would only be able to absorb 5% of the calcium in spinach. But that's not, kale doesn't have high amounts of oxalates in it, so it's better, the calcium our body absorbs it slightly better from kale, but not as good as from the milks or from the cheese. So the best bioavailability of calcium is from cheese and the fortified plant-based milk products. So everyone voted, not everyone, most people voted the Emmental cheese to have the most. Now, if it was on 100 grams basis, would it be more? Yes, it would be. But because I only put 30 grams there, it's 220 milligrams. So it's a really good source of calcium. And as we've said before, that's a really great reason for having the cheese and being allowed to have the cheese in the diet, because it is such a good source of bioavailable calcium. But of course, to help your body absorb the calcium, you need to have the vitamin D with it as well to help the calcium be more efficiently absorbed from your gut. And also, if you spread your calcium intake out over the day, that will help your body absorb it better as well.
I got a question from Joel. What about the efficiency of vegetal calcium because of calcium to phosphorus ratio and vitamin D in soya, almonds, etc.?
I know that nuts are not very well absorbed very well. Yes, because of phytates and oxalates. Was that the question? Shall I have a look at it?
I think the question is whether the restriction about vegetal calcium also applies to fortified soya drink.
The efficient about the calcium being efficiently absorbed from soya milk. Yes, it's not as good as cheese and as cow's milk, but it is absorbed better than vegetables and plant-based. Yeah.
I think it's also worth saying that the calcium that goes into the soy milk is similar to the calcium you get in a tablet, often a calcium carbonate, which is not necessarily the best bioavailable source of calcium either. So you have phytate from the soya and you have the actual salt of calcium in there. So there's two reasons why it will be less bioavailable than cheese.
Yeah, thank you, Pat. Okay, and then my last poll of the evening is just a fun poll, really. So which foods that are now allowed in the diet do you enjoy the most? Is it fruit and vegetables? Is it legumes? Is it mature cheese or the allowed cheeses? Or is it soy-based products? It would also have been interesting maybe to see the age, what age, because I'm sure, like I said before, children won't be pleased to have vegetables in their diet. So the highest with 46% is mature cheese or allowed cheese, which I kind of expected that to be, but that's interesting. Thank you. So in conclusion, the diet is just a restriction of dairy foods or foods containing milk, unless it's a suitable cheese, butter, oil, milk fat, or caseinates. So the guidelines were the first attempt to make an international consensus of the diet, and they will be reviewed again and more evidence looked at. So it could change slightly again, hopefully opening it up a bit more. So if you want to find out more information about the guidelines, or you want to read them yourself, and then you can find them on the Galactosemia Network website, and this is where you can find them where they've been translated into different languages as well. And then if you want to find out more information, do go to your local dietitian, and then also you could also contact me, or dietitians can contact me. I'm Louise at galactosemia.org. And if I can't answer the question, I will ask someone who can answer the question.
Well, Louise, thanks a lot for your great presentation.
Thank you.
I hope you can open the Q&A also yourself. It's at the bottom, and you can see that there are quite some questions. So maybe we can make a shared effort with the three of you trying to answer the questions, because for me they sound pretty specialist.
Okay. All right, I'll read the first one then. Our newborn is being fed with rice formula, and comparing with the previous baby's evidence, extra cramps and abdominal discomfort. Could this be related to the rice formula rather than soy-based formula? So I'm not a paediatric dietitian. I don't know if anyone else is, whether Elizabeth, you could answer that.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure what will be the reason that it is tolerated less, not that well. So I'm a pediatric dietitian, but it's too global to answer this specific question. But I think it's not logical that it's tolerated less well than when you would have given other formulas.
You probably need to speak to your dietitian or your medical team.
That's a good answer. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So Katharina, if you are able to measure galactose levels in cheese, how come you're not sure about the galactose level in offal? Good question. Pat, do you know the answer to that?
My understanding is that it's because offal is probably not that widely eaten these days, the levels have just not been measured. The Galactosemia support group who've supported analysis in the UK have not looked at the levels. The earliest analysis that's been done, I think, is back in the 60s or the 70s, and we couldn't find much data there. So it's all restrictions based on hearsay of what people might have done back in the 70s when the diet was quite strict. So as far as I'm aware, there are no analyses, but it's not that it can't be done.
Thank you. Then the next question from Fabrice about cheese. Are cheeses with less than 1 milligram of glucides to be okay? Does that mean galactose? Is there an indication of galactose content with the glucide rate of the label? Is anyone able to help me out with that question? I don't know if I'm understanding it right or not. The glucides?
I'm not sure. Do you think it means glucose, 1 milligram? But then we're not looking at the glucose level.
Yeah,
It might be carbohydrates.
Yeah.
Yes, it might be the carbohydrate.
Yeah, the sugars, I guess.
Yes,
Ah.
the galactose content is not on the label of cheese. So the only analysis is done, has been paid for and done externally. So the supermarkets and the cheese manufacturers do not put it on the labels usually.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I don't know if it is in every country, but in the Netherlands, on almost every label now is stated how many calories a product is containing, yes, and also the carbohydrates and also the sugars. So the sugars are sugar or fructose or lactose. So if the sugars are 0, theoretically you can say, if the analysis has done well, that you might be able to eat it. But 0 can be 0.4, and you don't know where the analyses are coming from. And I checked a lot of labels, and it's not always consistent. So it's a bit tricky to only rely on the amount of sugars, I guess, for the Dutch situation.
Yeah. And in the UK, we'd only go for the ones that we know we've been analysed and we know are safe. Okay. So Eric's asking about the calcium level of cheddar. I don't know exactly, but it's similar, the levels, to what I put up before. All cheese has a similar amount of calcium in it. And my understanding is there's not different amounts of calcium in different cheeses. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well,
I'm
in
nodding,
the Dutch
so
hard cheeses, it's
correct.
yeah. In the Dutch hard cheeses, one what glass of milk contains as much calcium as 1 serving, about 20 grams of cheese.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But there won't be much of a difference between cheeses, I expect.
No, I don't think there is.
Great. Someone's written, how about Gouda? Go back to Lisbeth.
Yeah, that's what I said. So it's about up to 200 for 1 serving of cheese, milligrams.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So Leah is asking, my 5-year-old has poor milk teeth, perhaps due to premature medication rather than galactose. Suggested by my dentist, soya milk is perhaps not the best option for tooth health. What is your view? we do have calcium and vitamin D supplements. Again, I don't do children, so I don't know, Elizabeth, do you have any comments?
Yeah, well, I'm not that good into the teeth health, so not in this specific case. So I don't know if this is the reason that the dentist has complaints, and the child maybe as well.
In general, I don't see why soy milk would be worse than any regular milk, as in the amount of sugars you ingest. And I think soy milk, especially fortified soy milk, is a very good source of calcium and vitamin D. Depends if you take it with a bottle, and it's very different than when you drink it from a glass or with a straw. So you don't want to be sucking on a bottle of any kind of milk all day, but other than that, I think it's not relevant, really.
Thank you, Annette. Okay, Fabrice says, in a vegetarian diet, legumes, such as beans, peas, lentils, would be significantly more consumed. What is the reasonable daily quantity in grams of legumes? I don't think you need to worry about that. I still don't think it would be high enough that we would worry about that. Would everyone agree?
Yes.
Yeah, so don't worry. You can have, that'll be fine. Okay, and then Olivia. If I'm taking calcium pills, why do I need to think about foods that contain the most amount of calcium in? I think what Pat was saying earlier about the calcium that is put into the pills is not the most bioavailable of calcium, and actually the most calcium is absorbed the best from our diet and from cheese and kind of from natural foods. If you could get all your calcium from your diet and your dietitian looked at your diet and saw that you're having all the calcium you needed, then you wouldn't necessarily need to take calcium supplements. So if you think that's the case for you, then do have a conversation with your team and with your dietitian about whether you can get enough in the diet or whether there's a reason that you need to take the extra calcium tablets. Anyone else want to add to that? I
think also with cheese, for example, by having cheese in a diet from an early age, it makes the diet more normal. A child can have pizza more easily. So the galactosemia diet is not as restrictive as it would once have been. And I think that's important.
Thank you. So Joelle, in France, soya is not recommended for children less than 3 because of isoflavone. What do you think about this restriction? I think we've had a lot of talk about this, worry about this, and Pat, you know a lot about this, don't you?
Yes, in the UK we have thought long and hard about whether soy milk should be used in infancy and soy generally because of the phytoestrogen content. And I think overall the consensus was that soy milks, for example, in infancy, were more normal. All the other milks have other problems. So if there is a soy milk available, it was felt that that was the best milk to use. And I think the same thing goes with the other soy products. If you don't have soy milks, you are more restricted, or soy foods, to other products. And I suppose nowadays we have nut milks and oat milks and coconut milks and so on. So there is a bigger variety, but at one time there was not much available.
Well, and also there was 2 or 3 years ago a very large study which took all studies on soy dilemmas together and looked at the isoflavones. And really, with all the studies taken together, they concluded there's no evidence of any harmful effects at all.
Great, thank you. So yes, there are quite a lot of questions. Shall I keep going, or tell me when to stop? Okay.
Please go ahead.
Okay. In France, we recommend full infant casein formula, which is free of lactose and galactose, which is used for diarrhea, less than 3.5 milligrams of galactose with good taste. Do you have this experience? So we would use soya infant formula in the UK, so we don't often use the casein formula. I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on that.
Lisbeth, would you like to
Yeah.
comment?
We start with because we don't have a soy formula, infant formula. We did have, but we don't have anymore. So now we start with a casein formula for infants, and then gradually change that to soy milk, our infant soy milk, infant commercially soy milk. And in case of diarrhea, they're both okay. So we are not focused on changing the kind of milk in case of diarrhea. Is that okay, Annette, or do you have any?
Well, I wonder if the question is, because I think they probably mention, I think, Joelle, do you mention the low lactose formula? We've been looking at that, and it's if the baby is fed the full formula diet, you go up to 35 milligrams of galactose, which is probably not a problem. But in an infant which is still intoxicated because the GAL1P is still coming down, it might be, it's a bit higher than the hydrolysate. So personally, I choose usually the hydrolysates, but I don't think anyone really knows which is the best option.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So Christian says, in your experience, is it possible to reach the RDA of calcium and phosphorus with natural foods only? I think it is possible. You'd have to be using a lot of soya milk fortified with calcium every day, maybe using some cheese every day. In the UK, we do have products that are fortified with extra calcium, some of the breakfast cereals and some of the breads. So I do think you, with help and using those products, you could do, yes. And then Antonio says, what do you think about the inclusion of gelling agents and thickeners in candies? Are they all considered to be included in the dietary fibre, even in their, if their composition is galactose polysaccharides? I think they are okay to have in the diet, because I don't think it's mentioned. But would someone else like to comment that knows it in a bit more depth?
I think when I remember looking at various gelling agents and thickeners, in the quantities that they're used, it's minute really. So unless somebody's having very large quantities, it wouldn't be a problem. But most of them don't have a large amount of galactose in them. It depends which gelling agents and thickness you use. There are some that are perfectly okay anyway, and then there are one or two which do have some galactose in them.
Great, thank you. And then Katharina is asking about fortified oat milk, such as the brand Oatly. Is that a healthier calcium source? And would you recommend soy over oats, or does it not make a difference? I think it probably depends on your age, how much protein you're getting in your diet. So for an adult, I'd probably say any type of plant-based milk is fine if it's fortified with calcium. If maybe it's a younger child that needs a bit more protein, you might want to go for the soya milk because it's a bit higher in protein, whereas oat milks are lower in protein and the nut milks are even lower in protein. But when it comes to calcium, they're all fortified with a similar amount of calcium and vitamin D. So that would be fine. Does anyone else want to comment?
Yes, I do agree. And but I think it's important to always check the labeling if there is indeed calcium added. And also for the vitamin B2 and B12, it is really, because milk is a great source of those vitamins as well. So it would be good if they are added as well. And it depends on the brand, and it also depends on, it's not always that the one of all the kinds of soy products from one manufacturer are always fortified in the same way. So check the labels.
Yeah, another mineral that we've not talked about that can be low in a milk-free diet is iodine. And in the UK, iodine is mainly found in milk. So some of the milks do now add iodine, but only a very few of them. And Oatly is a brand that adds iodine into it now. And for example, Alpro soya milk, there's only a couple of the Alpro soya milks that have got iodine in. Some of the other ones don't have iodine in. So you always have to check the label to see, ideally, if it was fortified with calcium, vitamin D, B12, iodine, which are all the things that you would normally find in milk. If they put them into the plant-based milk, then that would be even better. That would be the best one to choose. Okay, I think that was the last question.
Yeah, I think so. We're out of questions and we're in time. So well done. Thanks. Thank you so much. All of you, Lisbeth, Pat and Louise. And I think this brings us, and Annette, of course, also, sorry. But this brings us, I think, to the end of day one. And I'm personally very happy with the results so far. I personally liked also the interactivity with the polls, because this is a unique opportunity to get some feedback from the audience with very interesting questions and answers. So thank you all for that. I think we have lots of new knowledge and lots of things to think about tonight, and we'll continue again tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. I'm really proud also in the audience with the timekeeping, and I want to hand over to Estella for the last closing words of today.
Well, thanks a lot, and I was thinking that that any professional people that organize these meetings should just come to you for advice, because you just have organized this really nicely, Jeroen. Thanks a lot. Thanks to everyone. Sleep tight, and we will see you in the morning. Okay.
Yeah. And by the way, I couldn't have done this without all the ladies, especially with Clementine, Mirte and Maaike. They gave me some good support as well.
That's true. So thanks a lot. You just are just brilliant teamwork. Thank you. Bye-bye. See you tomorrow, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you, Louise. That was great.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.